Coming up on the live and interactive ACSA Legislative Lunch Break, Edgar and I will get you all of your latest news and information from the state capitol and CDE with an in-depth analysis on how it impacts you. Plus, today we are talking about the new laws with pregnancy leave. We've got one of our attorneys and we've got an expert in the field to talk about that important topic as we head into the new school year.
The ACSA Legislative Lunch Break starts now.
And it's a couple of minutes after 1 o'clock. We welcome you on a Wednesday to the live and interactive ACSA Legislative Lunch Break, along with Dr. Edgar Zazweta, ACSA's Executive Director. I'm Naj and Edgar, ACSA's Senior Director of Marketing and Communications. Welcome. We're back in the seats today after taking several weeks off for the summer. Welcome back. Go ahead and jump into the chat and say hello and let us know where you're watching from today. Edgar, you had asked right before, you're like, okay, we're back in the seat. Hope we don't mess this thing up. I really hope we don't mess this thing up today. I
came close. I forgot. I forgot for a second. What do we say at the beginning? And we've only been doing this how many years? 5 years?
5? No, wait a minute.
4?
6 years.
6 already?
Yeah, we started this in May of 2020.
All right. Yeah. And, so that's always been the hardest part for me, and the most awkward, the opening line there to remember what I say. But we got it. We're off to a good start.
We got it.
And we're off to and Michael reminded me, I guess this commits us, right, that we're going to be doing this for the next few weeks in a row. I know after our little summer hiatus, if whatnot, right? So I'm excited. It's always one of my favorite parts of the year, especially with our members. I don't know if they do a good job of faking it, whatnot, but regardless, I always say this, regardless of how tired or beat down or exhausted they might be in May and June, they always come back excited. Again, they might just be faking it, but I'm definitely feeling that back to school energy. It does feel like summer has gotten so short now because all of our schools start in August and whatnot. So, but I'm feeling the vibes. I'm feeling the people being excited to get back into it, and we're excited to get back.
We're excited. Yes, absolutely. Want to say hello to our first viewer on the chat today, Jason Engel with us, and Jared Hungerford, our statewide vice president for legislative action. Before we get into the news piece of this, Edgar and I, we haven't been on for about a month or so, and I was doing the quick math because Edgar has been globetrotting around this world for a good portion of the summer. Now, again, quick math here, and I'm not a math guy; I'm a words guy.
We'll see if we trust your math here.
Yeah. So the one trip that I took this summer was to Hawaii. Beautiful trip, right? 2,462 miles. Sacramento to Honolulu. Okay. Yeah. My quick math here, Edgar, is you're at nearly 10,000 miles this summer, 9,687. That includes 2 trips out of town to the World Cup, right? Seattle and Mexico City, and your recent vacation, which is why I haven't seen you in a few weeks, to Europe, to Greece. You've been globetrotting this summer.
I think I'm making up for lost time. I remember saying, I was telling my kids this, hopefully they remember it. I've seen, some social media references. As a kid, I was just happy that if the hotel if the Holiday Inn had a pool, right? So one of the things that, for my daughter graduated high school, that was one of the things she really wanted to go to Europe. So we made it happen for her. So it's been great. I took a couple of weeks off. Those that don't know, I'm just preaching the choir. I love Europe, but Euro summers are not for the weak. The lack of ice, the lack of AC, and it was very, very hot. But like I told my kids, it tests our American mentality in so many things. So it's been a great summer. Try to take the advice that we always give of just taking some time away. I definitely did, and I feel recharged to get back at it. We'll see. I don't know if I trust your math that much, but
come on. Hey, look, all I can say is the lack of air conditioning and no ice for my drinks is a non-starter. That there, I will not go to Europe. There's no way. Folks, we are going to talk about the pregnancy leave law that will go into effect officially January 1, 2027. We've got two great guests to talk about that in just a few moments. First, though, legislature is back in session after portions of their summer recess legislative session back on at the state capitol. There's a key deadline approaching for the legislature and any legislation that has a price tag for the state, and hundreds of bills right now, Edgar, as you know from your experience in the Capitol, being heard in the Senate and Assembly fiscal committees this week, including some ACSA sponsored bills. And next Friday is the last day for these committees to approve bills that were placed on the suspense file, which is basically any remaining bill that costs money, whether it's the state or special funding. Let's tell you about the ACSA related bills, though, that are in the Capitol right now. Assembly Bill 2490, if approved, would enable substitute teachers to serve in a general ed or special education classroom for up to 70 days. There are two bills that are designed to streamline reporting. The first, AB 2008, would require CDE to develop a single streamlined grant reporting template, and AB 2496 would begin the process of repealing the school accountability report card by requiring CDE to identify publicly available data sources that provide substantially similar information to the SARC, and Assembly Bill 2519, which would ensure that charter school administrators can retain their STIRS membership and not jeopardize potential career advancement. Edgar, since you've had years of experience inside the Capitol, when they come in for this August legislative session, I mean, I just named the ACSA sponsored bills and co-sponsored bills, but this has to be like the everybody has to be just on like red alert, rushing to get things done during this last piece of the legislative session.
Yeah, it's funny how the irony is we're talking about the beginning here with our school year starting and people kind of ramping up for the start. It's almost the opposite here with the legislature, that they're going, it's a sprint to the finish in this last month. They usually are off for about 4 weeks, and then they come in and, like any institution, procrastinate a number of things. And a lot of the big decisions, frankly, happen here in the last months on big legislation, the big push, compromises on things. So yeah, there's a lot of attention here in the building that we're sitting across the street from. And undoubtedly, we're going to have a number of things that we're keeping an eye on, not just on the ACSA sponsored legislation, but other pieces that are going to impact our members, impact our schools, impact our students. There's undoubtedly there'll be something to report on here in the coming weeks.
Yeah, lots happening over there at the state capitol. And of course, we're going to keep you up to date on that. We've got an important show scheduled for you next week. We're going to be talking about cell phones in schools. And then the week after that, we've got some of our ACSA legislative advocates scheduled to come on the show to give you an update on what's happening in the legislature. So mark your calendar for those couple of shows. Let's switch to our topic now. As part of the budget, there were some new rules and regulations with respect to pregnancy leave that go into effect on January 1, 2027 for our educators, our California public school educators. I want to give you a rundown of what this means for the school districts and what this means as far as the law is concerned. We've got two great guests on the show today. Kylie Ibarra is the Assistant Superintendent of Personnel at Riverside Unified School District, and Danielle Connolly, the Vice President at School Services of California. And I want to first acknowledge to our guests here, this is a transformative law. All of us believe this is going to bring some great benefit to school staffs at all levels. And this creates this space, this platform, really, this pathway where the state and the school districts are delivering more support to staff. So it's great news. Again, a transformative law. Danielle, let me start with you. What have been the main questions that you guys have been receiving over at School Services with respect to this law? And what are some of the biggest challenges ahead?
Well, I think that, obviously front and center are what are the fiscal implications of paid pregnancy disability leave? And how do we calculate the cost? How do we figure that out? Obviously, also dealing with the substitute pools and concerns regarding not only providing coverage, but also consistent coverage for our educators and classified staff. hearing a lot of questions regarding the nuances in terms of implementation, and what if the employee delivers the baby in December, this law is effective January 1st, what would their entitlements be? And so really just, the truth is leave is tricky. Leave is complicated, arguably one of the most difficult functions in an HR or payroll department to manage. And many of our LEAs out there struggle with this area in terms of having effective practice and also just role clarity about who's going to take care of what. And in order to calculate costs, forecast what the impacts would be locally, we need to have those systems in place. And so we see many kind of scrambling around, trying to wrap their arms around how do we manage and deal with this as we get ready for January.
Kylie, Danielle, first of all, thank you for helping us out and offering your expertise to this topic. Kylie, and I think Danielle just kind of framed it in terms of the question I was going to ask, because here, and we were talking about legislation before you got on, right? And here's the classic case. Sacramento has an idea, and at face value, it's like, yeah, this is great. Who wouldn't support this, right? Why wouldn't we, as Naj pointed out? And I think that there are people, that we want to make sure that we give them the ability to obviously take care of their families, to have the leave, to for all the reasons that these type of laws are important. The flip side, as administrators, you folks are in the position of having to implement that, right? Danielle's former administrator, now advises folks on how to do this. You're in the trenches, right? And I think that's the hardest part sometimes to communicate to our policymakers. But with that said, acknowledging that, yeah, the intent, and there was a lot of back and forth on this. What does this mean from an implementation strategy for your school district, for your community, in terms of trying to make this happen here by January 1st?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, because I think part of what we also have to do, one of the challenges, is ensuring that we're clear. Danielle spoke to it a little bit, but making sure that people understand that this starts January 1st. And so that's one of the biggest questions. And the implementation, going to the second part of what you're asking, is really having districts. And one of the things we're doing is developing visual flow charts from our HR department to be able to really show that pregnancy disability leave and the transition from, because what people aren't missing is the CFRA. So this can also be in conjunction with CFRA. You could have somebody out for close to 26 weeks. So being able to ensure that we are training people so that they understand when this does go into effect. So if I have a baby in September, October, or November, not January, it's January of 2027. And then really training our principals and our site managers, because sometimes they're the first person to be able to hear that a person is expanding their family. And that first contact needs to be able to provide them accurate information. So we're doing a lot of work with providing like one kind of page cheat sheets, and then we're going to be training our site administrators to be able to understand. And then I think for us, if you can, in a district, one of the things that we're trying to do is assign one person within our personnel staff, our HR staff, to handle family leave intake. So employees really get that consistent and compassionate guidance. It's hard enough to navigate leaves, I'm going to tell you, but having one person who's your contact is one of the things. And so we're starting to roll out. We'll be starting shortly. We start school on Monday, so we'll be starting to really roll out that district-wide messaging to help all of our staff understand.
And folks, if you have any questions for Kylie or Danielle, go ahead and put those into the chat. We'll try and tackle some of those near the end of the show. Danielle, let me ask you about eligibility requirements, because I'm reading that there are no requirements such as minimum hours worked or length of service. Can you kind of clear this up for us about how the new law impacts full-time employees, part-time employees, brand new employees, those that are just starting their jobs with the district, officially as of July 1? Clear this up for us.
Okay. So I will. So believe it or not, I kind of feel like this paid PDL is pretty simple. It's a standalone leave entitlement. There aren't employment thresholds attached to it in terms of service, and it runs consecutively with most leaves. Concurrent and consecutive are really important words when we talk about leave tracking, in terms of, can other leaves run at the same time, or do you wait for one leave to exhaust and then another one starts? This leave is consecutive. The other point that I want to make is pregnancy disability leave is not new. Under current state law, employees are entitled to pregnancy disability leave. I believe it's 17 and 1/3 week or something like that. Of course, we have to have fractions involved with this, but this particular leave already exists. It can be paid or unpaid, so the employee's accrued personal illness leave would apply. The difference with this particular new law is that it's the paid leave that is applied before any of the accrued leave is applied. The other thing that I also want to mention is that it can be up to 14 weeks, but it can be less than 14 weeks, or it could be more than 14 weeks because, as we know, medical conditions are rather unpredictable and not really within the span of control of the employee. And so as far as qualifications, this could be for your regular contracted, certificated, classified employees, whether they're part-time or full-time. Upon employment, they are entitled to paid PDL. And so that's really the same as their personal illness leave. Now, they may not qualify for CIFRA, which is something that Kylie had alluded to earlier, which we'll probably get into in a bit, but they would at the very least qualify for their personal illness leave, for paid PDL, and then also for differential or extended leave provided by the Ed Code, which also does not have employment threshold. So if you wanted to try to kind of sort this out in an uncomplicated way, your statutory Ed Code leaves do not include employment thresholds similar like state and federal leaves do. Hopefully, Naj, I made a little bit of sense.
It's funny hearing Danielle talk, and I'm glad that she's confident that this is pretty simple, because I think just hearing both of you talk, it just makes me being so appreciative for our HR and personnel folks who, year after year, especially in the state, have to come in and make sense of the constant changes in state law and requirements. Obviously becomes the lifeline of our districts, which are our people. So thank you to you and all your colleagues around the state who make sense of this. Kylie, on that note, we know that in the world of personnel or HR, that it often starts and ends with collective bargaining or trying to deal with our, with our partners at the school district. So what are the implications of this in terms of our employees and the bargaining table? Is this something that is there going to be ramifications of this from your perspective here moving forward?
Yeah, I think right now we're not seeing that there's going to be, because it's a law, and within personnel, when laws come into place, you follow them. I think what we're really trying to do, though, where you can see it becoming a bargaining issue, is we have to continue to frame this as a win. This is something that our labor partners have really advocated for, and I think recognizing it's a major win for educator retention and gender equity, really establishing that collaborative foundation. We really have to continue to say that at the table, because I think there could be impacts that come up that they might see. So one of the things that we do, and that most districts do, is anytime it's a law, the benefit itself is mandated by state law. So local bargaining will, center on the operational impacts. But we're going to have to make sure, and districts, I would suggest, districts need to look at their board policies, administrative regulations, and any contract language that could leave notification windows and sub-coverage protocols. So I think that's the part where we're going to have to maybe get into the weeds at the table, would be really leave notification windows and then sub-coverage protocols for that. Outside of that, I think this is, again, going back to one of those wins. It's going to be challenging for some districts, especially when you're looking at a shortage in subs right now statewide, and especially in our classified world, because we were talking for our paras and our instructional assistants, there's limited opportunity for that. So really working with our labor partners to understand that there could have to be some different creative ways to address that.
Danielle, anything you would add on the labor implications?
Yeah, I think the pressure is going to be about the costs, right? How much is this going to cost, and what's left out of this additional COLA that we can apply to salary? And so I think that it's important to remember, as we're thinking about the costs, the historical data in terms of how many pregnancy disability leaves have you experienced in the last couple of years will help guide you in terms of forecasting. In addition, your employee demographics, your attrition levels are going to drive some of this, because the more turnover you have, it's more likely the more newer teachers that you're hiring, which are more likely going to experience pregnancy at some point in their career versus our more experienced teachers. So these are all factors that are really important. The other thing to remember is that leave, there's no magic bucket of leave, right? So we don't have any fiscal support of paid leave. This is included in your personnel costs. So if I'm a teacher and I'm out on paid leave, it's going to be part of my personnel expenditure that's already built into your budget. The cost is really going to come from the substitutes or your contractors or vendors that you have to use to fill in because of our substitute shortages and the pressures we see there. So really looking at your substitute costs, especially your long-term sub costs, those are sky high in many of our LEAs to help encourage coverage. That's where we believe we're going to see some friction and sandpaper at the table, because it's likely that your labor partners are not going to agree with your calculations and want to sweep some of that into salary. And so also, one last thing about COLA is that doesn't translate directly locally, right? It's going to be based on other factors like declining enrollment and all these other pressures that you're experiencing at the table. So I think that's going to be a rather intense factor this year.
Danielle, I asked you that question earlier about eligibility. We do have a question that's come in from @DG, who gives an example, and perhaps you might be able to provide our viewers some clarity. The example is an employee giving birth in late November. If still disabled, does the person get 14 weeks beginning in January, as long as they are still disabled? Can you maybe shine a light on that?
Well, so it's new, it's untested. I'm not entirely sure, but just reading the exact language of the law, I don't see anything that would prevent this employee from being entitled to some of this leave if they were still absent from work due to pregnancy disability. And I just want to mention that they're not just eligible for 14 weeks period. It needs to be according to their physician statement that releases them from work. The typical absence for delivery of a child is 6 or 8 weeks. And so if that employee who delivered in November was only released from duty for 6 weeks and then started their parental baby bonding leave, I can't do the math, but I don't know if they would still be absent because of PDL on January 1st. If that absence for that reason ended before January 1st, then they wouldn't have that eligibility.
This is one of those topics where we expect, and I think this is helpful just to reiterate some of the provisions here. We're getting a few questions. So Kylie, I'll go to you first. I know there are just some confirmation here. Maybe I'll throw both of them, and then both of you can touch on it. I think it was Leslie wanted to clarify, are we talking about certificated and classified both? And then I know Danielle spoke to this about the concurrent nature of the leave, but I'll start with you and then I'll give Danielle a chance to add anything.
Sure, yeah, it's both. It's classified and certificated. And that's one of the pieces that when you look at the impact, when we're talking about an impact in general, it really districts where we have to start to think, moving from that day-to-day sub and calling in and creating, we're going to have to create long-term plans, semester-long sub positions. Looking at, and to Danielle's point, I like how she said it, because it's not just at the table with the cost of what it's currently costing, but what it could cost, because you might have to up your sub pay to be able to get these subs in there, to guarantee that you have steady talent and people in these positions for which could be up to the 26 weeks. So things that districts I know are looking at are building internal pipelines for those hard to fill positions, such as your special education. Yes, Bill 2490 with the 70 days is going to help, but you're still looking at 26 weeks is a long time. And so, and that's if they end up getting that 26 weeks, it could just be the 14, but even at that, 14 can be an impactful. So yes, it's both. And so you've got to prepare on both sides, not just your classified, not just your certificated, your classified too.
Danielle, do you want to touch on the concurrent leave? I know that was something you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, there's one. The law, the way it's written is super clear that this leave is applied prior to any other leave. Now, the one question that I have, and I don't really have an answer yet. I just think that this is the case. It's really a legal question. I'm wondering about FMLA and if FMLA can run concurrently with paid PDL. And the reason why is because FMLA is not paid leave. It's an unpaid leave afforded by federal law. And so that's the one nuance that we're kind of working with the legal community to figure out. There's a lot of lingering questions like any new law when it comes to implementation. We've got to kind of work through it to figure it out. But as far as CFRA, as far as paid accrued personal illness, vacation, any of the other accrued paid leaves that LEA employees are entitled to, this leave runs consecutive. FMLA is the only area that I'm wondering about and don't really have a clear answer yet. But again, that leave is unpaid. Now, that is of interest to us because that's job protected, benefit protected. So if it can't run concurrently, then that could conceivably extend a leave by up to 12 weeks, unpaid, but the employer would still be paying for benefits, their portion of the benefits, and guaranteeing the job and position. So that's still circulating, but the other leaves are all pretty clear.
Kylie, let me ask you about creating pathways for employees to understand what is going on, because obviously there's a pathway for information delivery and just informing, and you can tell that there are a lot of questions out there just by listening to some of our viewers over in the comment section. But okay, so pathways to inform, but what about like creative pathways that we could implement? Maybe Riverside is currently implementing some of these that might make things a little bit more straightforward for staff.
I think that's a little bit of what we spoke to is creating, and I'm hearing you ask the question with pathways for them to understand the leaves. And so creating those simple visual flowcharts. I think Danielle, she spoke to it really, really nicely and profound, and being able to get them to understand, because there are a lot of leaves out there. Maybe this one is clear to some people, but not all. And so being able to let them understand what is showing how pregnancy disability leave is. This also includes more than just pregnancy. And so that's the other part, that in the past, some of those leaves haven't given the full 14 weeks. And we have to also be able to educate them on that. And then the difference between those transitions from the CFR bonding leave and sick leave. So really creating a very clear visual flowchart that aligns with what leaves you have and how you're able to use them in your district, and then the training your staff, working with your labor associations to also help have them get out and help train, creating collaborative messages that you can push out together so that everybody's getting the same message.
Danielle, I'll ask one final question and give Kylie a chance to give thoughts. And first of all, I have to say, Danielle, I think you've quickly gone up the school services rankings here. I know amongst the guests, given your expertise. Patty's hard to beat, right? She's been on here. John just steals all your guys' materials, so right, it's just the thing.
I will never beat Patty Herrera, and I'll never be funnier than John Gray. So I'll
got John for sure.
Third or fourth place wherever I am.
I see there's a number of questions here. Folks are kind of trying to wrap their brain. Obviously, this is, if there's one takeaway, is that this is going to be an area and I'll use the collective us, we're going to have to continue hit on as folks are making sense of this. Just, a broad question, just advice for the folks that are trying to wrap their heads, trying to figure out resources, trying to work with their school communities to put this in practice. What general advice would you give from your perspective? And I'll ask Kylie the same thing.
Sure. I think that this is a really good opportunity for LEAs to take a look at their leave practices. Who's responsible for leaves within their LEA? What are the division of duties between HR and business services? And then what are their communication practices with employees? What are the structures in place to manage, more specifically, to even document employee attendance? Do you have practice in place for employees to report their attendance. And there's many LEAs who struggle in this area. As you can see from this very short conversation, it's really incredibly complicated. The other thing that I would encourage is train your staff who are handling leave. My first job when I worked for a school district was leave specialist. This is my 27th year in this work, and I'm still confused all the time. I still need a lot of training, legal training, practitioner training. It's really an ongoing thing because, as we've seen, leaves have changed and they're constantly evolving, and there's no two cases that are exactly the same. They're very unpredictable and complicated. So I think that that's the first thing I would say. The second thing I would say, when things get really confusing and overwhelming to me, I tend to compartmentalize and just kind of put things in perspective. And we have leave structures in place. PDL is not new. This is just a new entitlement within that. And so I think pulling back from it and not getting too worried. This is already existing. This is already in practice. They're just getting paid for this determined amount of time. And so that would be my way to help sort it out.
Kylie, as you can see, many of your colleagues, a lot of questions, a lot of pieces, just reflecting on the whole conversation, just thoughts for folks like yourself who are trying to, grapple with this as we put this in place over the next few.
I think that's a good question. I think that's the hard part is there, for districts, leaves, there's the operational piece. It's not just the financial, it's not just the leave component that I think the districts are also trying to navigate, it's the operational. When I say operational, it's what systems are we putting in place to be able to ensure, especially for some of our harder to fill positions, consistent substitutes, whether it's classified or certificated, one of the two. But I think our takeaways, when you ask what are some of the biggest takeaways, is really, and Danielle kind of focused a little bit on it, but really training our people, making sure our staff has the right answers and consistent answers. They're not calling and getting one answer from someone else because it is new. And there can be some confusing components dependent upon what leave someone is looking for. So going back to, I sound like a broken record, but really creating that three-tiered chart to be able to say this leave, and this leave, and here's what you need to do, or here's what it goes from. And then that goes back to, if you have the ability to really assign somebody, we're fortunate enough in our district that we have somebody that handles classified and somebody that handles certificated leaves. But we're a large district. Not everybody has that luxury. Just like with subs, we're not as worried with our multiple subjects teacher substitutes, but we are a little bit worried with our single subject and with our classified. So really also rolling out a message and working with your labor associations so that they're helping you to send that positive message of things we can put in place.
Danielle, I know you all at School Services given the much attention on this. I know you folks are going to come out with some resources there that focus. So I'll give you a chance to maybe highlight, which will and hopefully answer some of these questions.
Yes, real quick, in the interest of time, we have we're providing paid PDL training just focused on this from the legislative legal side, HR, business, and payroll and fiscal implications. You can find the registration on our website, and this is going to happen sometime in October 15th, I believe. So encourage you all to attend, and we sort of got in the weeds, but we're going to get way down in the weeds in the webinar.
Okay, yeah, and we'll post a link to that in our chat for information on that professional development training presented by School Services of California. Kylie Ibarra, Assistant Superintendent of Personnel at Riverside Unified School District, and Danielle Connolly, Vice President at School Services of California. Kylie and Danielle, thanks so much for joining us on the show.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
And Edgar, we'll tie a bow on this, but I'm just looking at the chat, right? I'm seeing questions that we weren't able to get to from Clay Ross, from Roy Brown, Kristen Condit in here, Alma Orozco. This is clearly an opportunity for us to say, we're going to talk about this again. Yep. It seems like, obviously this just happened, right? But clearly there's a lot of questions about implementation, what this truly means. So I think we're going to come back on this topic for sure. And of course, School Services offering that training coming up in October.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know our HR council, who is a great resource to our folks around the state, I'm sure there's will be attention on that. So there's a network of folks for those personal HR professionals to use that network. And like you said, school services has, I know they have a Ask SSC function where you could go and ask them a direct question on top of, like the formal paid trainings that they have and whatnot. So yeah, I think we're all collectively going to stay focused on this.
Yeah, absolutely. Want to tell you about next week's show. We're going to be talking about cell phones in schools. Angela Duckworth, national researcher, has been conducting a study with superintendents across the country about cell phones and their policies. She'll be with us, as well as Ben Churchill, superintendent from Poway Unified School District. At his previous district in Carlsbad, he and his school board implemented some policies. He implemented policies very similar to that in Poway Unified. So Angela and Ben will join us.
Dr. Duckworth, I'll say that's a big get for the show. I mean, just for those that are not Dr. Churchill too, right? One of our great members there. I'm excited to have him on as well. But Angela Duckworth, for those that don't know, I mean, I think she's one of the more famous TED Talks on her book Grit, and obviously now has turned her attention and research on this issue of cell phones. So I'm really curious, something that our organization is helping partner there to try to get them some participation from California. So I'm excited to hear about what they have in store there in terms of looking at this complicated issue that I know you can't be in school in school administration with some way, shape, or form struggling with this issue of cell phones.
Yeah. Folks, want to tell you about our Lead with Pride symposium that is coming up September 30th through October 2nd at the Westin in Long Beach. Joy, community, and leadership. For information, go ahead and visit our website, ACSA.org, or after the show is done, you can click that QR code. Also want to make mention of this. We may not have been having many shows during the summertime, but we have been hard at work. We do have 2 new episodes of the Behind the Bills podcast. The first one, we talked with Michael Fine from FICMAT about some of the challenges right now with school finance. We also talked with ACSA legislative advocate Saret Kaminsky on Assembly Bill 959. We take a deep dive into that. So Behind the Bills, available on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Go ahead and check that out. Also want to tell you, if you have great stories happening in your school communities, we want to tell those stories too. Go ahead and send your photos, your talking points, and your news releases to Michelle Carl, our EdCal editor, Michelle Carl at mcarl@acsa.org. And now I've gotten everything in completely the wrong order. Folks, if you like what you've seen here on the ACSA Legislative Lunch Break, we invite you to become part of our family on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. You can go ahead and like us or subscribe to us. When you do and you turn on your notifications, you'll get instant alerts when Edgar and I are going to come on with breaking news and then our regularly scheduled show. There's a lot to talk about, Edgar, when we have completely blown through the bottom
we
of
went
the
38 minutes, and I feel like we still have some. And I love that Lisa threw out a plug for our Personnel Institute, which is obviously one of our best events the whole year. Obviously, this is going to be a big topic. So if you aren't already registered, a few spots left there as well.
Absolutely. Folks, thanks so much for joining us here on the live and interactive ACSA Legislative Lunch Break. Remember, we are live and interactive Wednesdays here on ACSA, Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Have a great rest of the day and rest of the week, and we'll see you next time.